Hi, I'm Garm1, and this is Midgardia's Creator Corner. I'm here today with Chris Longhurst. How's it going?
Pretty good. It is far too warm here in the UK, but I'm sure everyone knows that already.
Yeah, I mean, the warmth is the worst, man. Like, cold, you can put more clothing on. There is only so much you can take off, especially when we're recording video.
Yeah.
So, since this is Creator Corner, why don't you tell us how you got into the tabletop industry?
Um, I I first took a step into the tabletop industry in somewhere in the mid 2000s. I can't remember the exact year. I got a job with Mongoose Publishing in the UK, and I was basically their mail order guy. Like I just fulfilled mail orders and things. And from there, I segued into doing a bit of writing, a bit of editing, a bit of layout. I learned pretty much all the skills that I use now, or at least got the basics in doing that. Um, then I left them. I can't remember when. I was there for like 2 years. The last product I worked on was the first edition Traveller rulebook, which is pretty well received. Although I would like to credit Gareth Ryder Hanrahan with most of that rather than myself. I was just doing like project management on that one. Um, so I left. I think was that 2009, 2008, 2009, something like that. And then I kind of tried to put together a freelance career for a bit, and I had a couple of things published here and there, but I wasn't really working at it substantially. Um, and then in 2014, after a much kind of random noodling about, I ran. I was inspired to run um, fourth edition Dungeons and Dragons game based on a throwaway comment on RPGNet, which said the Dark Lord, the design space for Dark Lord of Storms is very large. And I came up with this idea. I was like, well, how about a campaign where there's like half a dozen Dark Lords of Storms battling to be the Dark Lord of Storms? I ran this game in fourth edition, and then when it was all done and the dust had settled, I looked at my notes and I thought I could just write this up and sell it. Um, and I converted it to Dungeon World in the process because I really like Dungeon World. It's very easy to kind of do up monsters and make them fancy. It's a lot easier, and also fourth edition was kind of on the way out at the time, and my sort of slightly haphazard approach to note taking works a lot better with a more narrative game than a crunchy one. And that became Plague of Storms, which is my first product. Sold 100 copies, and then was included in a bundle of holding, which kind of immediately boosted its sort of presence. And then I think it was it 2017. I think I did some design competition on Google Plus, much lamented Google Plus, um, where a guy said, "Here's a design challenge: do me a fantasy game without swords or Vancian casting or a few other things." And I thought, okay, magic school, but you're the faculty. And so I knocked together the basics of pig smoke in about 2 months, 2 months, something like that. And the guy running the competition didn't understand it at all, but I knew I had something good, so I wrote that up into a complete game. That was my first Kickstarter, which I'm pretty certain was 2017. Um, and it was a weird sensation. I set a goal for like £3,000, which is about as low as I could make it while still covering all the costs I had sketched out. And it felt like a reasonable target. Like, surely this isn't extravagant. And then I launched it and immediately thought, oh God, I'm asking for so much money. Nobody's going to want this thing. Um, I was wrong. Funded in 3 days, which, it's not your modern Kickstarter success, but it funded, made me about 7 grand, I think, at the end. So it's a tidy sum of money. And production of that was, well, apart from Jackie, the artist, hurting her hand and not being able to deliver any art, um, it went pretty smoothly because I just, when she told me that, I thought, okay, I'll just wait. Like, I'd rather have her work. So I waited for her to heal and get the art in. So it meant it was about a year late. But I delivered and it was popular. And it got some sort of pick up from various places. Saving Throw Show did a one shot of it. Saving Throw Show, which is recently, like yesterday, shut up shop, which is a
Yep.
real shame.
Yeah.
And it introduced me to Big Gay Nerds, my favorite podcast. Plug. Who did they've done like 3-4 seasons of it now, which is all a good time. And yeah, it just kind of, and that got me started. And yeah, after that, I just sort of kept doing stuff. I was lucky enough to know Mina McJander when she got started, and she formed like the UK Indie RPG League in, I want to say 2018 or so, which consisted of Rowan Rook and Deckard, who are huge, Black Armada, who do Lovecraft-esque bite marks, currently kickstarting Wreck This Deck, variety of things. Who else was in it at the time? Mina herself as UFO Press, and I am sure there's somebody I'm forgetting. I am pretty certain there's somebody I'm forgetting, and I don't like that at all. Anyway, that was the thing. I was far and away the smallest actor in that group, and we basically rode Rowan Rook and Deckard's coattails for a couple of years, until they went off to do their own thing, and now we're established now. We go to conventions, and that also kind of it gets me a convention presence. It got me talking to people like Maz at Rowan Rook and Deckard, who spent most of UK Games Expo trying to introduce me to other luminaries in the TTRPG space. So I was lucky to get in on that. Yeah, and I just keep releasing stuff now. I'll make a game, I'll release it, and then I'll disappear for several months to a year, and then I'll come out with something that is completely unlike everything I've done before, which makes it really hard to establish like a market presence, because it's like I'm not like, I know, the Dark Souls guy or the Dragon guy. You cannot, you'd struggle to predict what I'm going to put out next, even if I've told you what I'm working on, because odds are by the time I come out with something, I may have had another idea and done something completely different.
Yeah. I know how that goes. Like, I do articles for 2 Minute Tabletop, and a lot of times I'll be like, hey guys, my next article is this, and next month it is something just drastically different.
Yeah, yeah. I like to think that it makes this practice makes it quite difficult to form a core audience. That's a marketing term, but also when you get a core audience, they are extremely core. Like I think my core audience is about 6 people, who I'm not going to name because I will miss somebody. But I know that these people will probably pick up anything I make just on spec. So I try to make good stuff because I don't want to disappoint them. Fair's fair.
Yeah, I'm looking at your recent stuff on itch.io, and you've got like C issue X, which we talked about before, which is the
Yeah.
superhero stuff. Seven
Yep.
Golden Coins, which is a setting generator. Ends of the Earth, Weird Fantasy Hex Crawl, and Burning Neon, a solo cyberpunk RPG, and then Strike Force Omega, which is railguns and sorcery in space.
Space wizards with guns. Yeah. Because each of those, I'm just thinking, each of them has its own like little origin story. Like we talked about CH before, and for my Kickstarter backers, I am working on fulfilling it. Trust me, I haven't forgotten you. It's just taken a bit. And then 7 Golden Coins came out of my playing Elden Ring a lot, and I thought, wonder how I'd make a game that kind of captures this lore feeling, this kind of exploration of weird and esoteric stuff. And originally there was like a solo game attached to it, but I ditched that, so it's just like roll on a bunch of tables, get a weird esoteric setting, and then there's a system for digging into various bits, so it returns you lore depending on what you're interested in. And then Ends of the Earth was my entry for Zine Quest this year. I thought, I'll do another one. I got time. And then I saw a design contest for Furry RPG's Firelight system, which is a solo system for using playing cards to do a kind of Metroidvania type game. And so I immediately decided that I wasn't going to do Metroidvania with it. I was going to try and use the same system to do a narrative. Not sure how well it's worked, but it exists. It can be played. And then Strike Force Omega has been kicking around for a long time. Again, based on a throwaway comment from somebody talking about what was the Space Marine role-playing game, the 40k one? Death
Uh,
Watch?
Death Watch. Yeah, Death Watch would have been
Yeah,
one. Yeah, yeah.
I think so. Somebody was talking about Death Watch and like how it works, and about how the way it's supposed to work is, as the squad gains trust, they become more powerful, and because you can activate your various special moves more easily. And I thought, oh, this is good and all, but I don't like the system it's attached to. So I thought, what if I make my own Space Marine game, file all the serial numbers off, and have it do this? And I then kind of passed through several systems. I think it was originally Forged in the Dark, using like a squad playbook to track like how your special moves, so your team-based special moves and stuff. And then I read Lumen, and I thought, here's something. Because what I like about Lumen is you can do a combat in like 15 minutes while still keeping it interesting and just crunchy enough to keep the decisions going. Um, so I built Strike Force Omega on top of Lumen, um, really filed the serial numbers off, and so now you've got a game about like ex-corporate super soldiers who have to take up arms one last time to like defend the system they're living in. But also there's like sorcery and demons and an astral plane and all sorts of other fun stuff. So that's where that came from.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I was
yeah,
reading through the description just before we started this, and I would not have guessed Warhammer as the origin point.
yeah. With some of my games, you can quite clearly see where the inspiration was, and some of them they fall quite a distance from the original idea. Um, but I do try to write when I write the games. I do try to put a section in the front saying this is what I was thinking of when I wrote it. Here are my inspirations. Here are my, here are the touchstones for this.
Right, right. Yeah, I was looking at it earlier and I was like, Destiny maybe?
I played a bit of Destiny 2 when I had the flu. I thought it was a really great game for playing when I wasn't feeling at my best. Just
Yeah,
like, okay, point face towards enemy, pull trigger.
man, I it is cool that you got to work for Mongoose way back in the 2000s. Like they were producing some great stuff at that time.
Yeah,
That would have been what like Starship Troopers War Game era.
yeah. Starship Troopers Wargame, Battlefield Evolution,
Oh,
second edition Conan, or
yeah,
Mongoose Conan. Conan bounces around between licensees quite a lot.
yeah.
Um, I think I don't know. I wasn't doing my finest work at the time, but I learned a vast amount that, like I said, the skills I use today are in a large part the skills I learned there. Like especially being able to use desktop publishing software, like InDesign, Affinity, that kind of thing. Like I cut my teeth doing their free online magazine, Signs and Portents,
Right.
um, doing things that I'm sure make professional graphic designers weep. But the final thing looked all right. It was fine. Nobody ever complained. Not where I could hear, anyway.
I almost certainly saw some of your stuff back when I was in high school then if you were working on Science Importance. Like, cause I didn't have the money to play war game stuff, but I could sure read about it.
Yeah, yeah. I was the editor for Signs and Portents role player. I think I popped up in maybe a battle report in the Wargamer one, maybe two. I'm pretty confident I lost. I've never been good at war games.
Me neither. I think I've lost every single war game I played. So, be that Infinity or Warhammer or what have you.
Yeah. Well, I got into Games Workshop when I was like 9, I think, not much older. Um, through the Hero Quest board game.
Oh yeah.
I think that was released in the UK in like 1989 or so. And I loved that. That was so good. Um, And then, it had Games Workshop on it. It had ads for Games Workshop in, so off I went to Games Workshop because they had one like in a town not far from where I lived. So I took a look and I was hooked. The problem was I didn't like painting miniatures. Still don't. So, but they had this shiny thing called Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. I was like, great, everything I like about this, but I don't have to paint a damn thing. And that's pretty much that was my main vector into role playing games in general. It was that Dungeoneer, fighting fantasy RPG from about the same time, and my dad, who's big into model aeroplanes, like flying balsa wood models.
Nice.
And the shop he used to go to buy all his like specialist craft stuff had a big wall of RPGs. And so while he was chatting model planes, the guy behind the counter, I would read my way through their section of RPGs and occasionally buy one when I had some money.
Right on. Yeah. Yeah, I had some third edition Tau from 40K. Uh, they're not painted. They're primed if they're lucky. So what else have you got on the horizon for the future?
On the horizon, well, I have several projects ongoing. Hang on, let me just bring up my folder and I'll be able to just run down it and see which of these am I likely to actually do anything with. Still, I think I mentioned this last time we talked. I'm still working on Crossover, which is my sort of like crossover fan fiction game. Um, I've overhauled it from the ground up, so it's completely different to how it was before, and it may be different yet again. I haven't quite decided. What else have I got? I got a vague idea for a second Dark Souls game, which might also be a Monster Hunter game, which revolves around like grid combat and choosing your equipment. And like, um, I did a bit of testing on that, and right now it is too easy for the hunters. The monsters aren't dangerous enough, so that's where that is. I played a bit of Genshin Impact and at the same time played a bit of Ark Knights and came up with the fun idea to try and combine those as an RPG and identify what the fun is about Ark Knights and try and turn that into, like, again, some other crunchy combat type system. Not convinced that's going anywhere,
God, I
but
love
it's an
Dark
idea.
Knights. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like the style of Ark Knights, but I find the game itself, I find the tutorials very dull. Like, I don't think I actually got out of the tutorials because it was so dull.
I found the
But
game pretty fun, but like I like
yeah,
tower defense, you know.
yeah. My favorite tower defense is Defense Grid. I think Defense Grid 2 is probably slightly better, and I struggle to find anything that really compares to those. Like, I think those two just hit what I want from a tower defense game so perfectly that everything else is being judged against a pretty high standard.
Yeah, whereas my standard is like late noughties like flash games. Like that's my tower defense
Right.
experience, so like everything's good
Yeah.
to me.
What else have I got? I was interested in doing a retro clone of Legends of the Wulin, which is sort of there, kind of. Um, like I built this. Well, I say I built the system. I copied the system from the previous one. I've asked the original author if he minded, and he was like, "Yeah, go for it." So I sort of rewrote the system and tidied up a bit around the edges. I'm trying to strip out all the Chinese stuff because I'm not Chinese, so it feels a bit weird to use it. And replace it with like Western alchemy terminology instead, which was a lot more difficult than you think without really crowbarring like some alchemical terms into that 5 element wheel structure. Um,
Yeah,
do,
because you've
do,
got
do,
like the three prime elements, and then and then fire, water, earth, air.
yeah, you've got your like your 4 prime elements and
It's like
then a
salt,
bunch of like
mercury,
yeah,
something,
salt.
sulfur, maybe.
Yeah, sulfur's in there. Ash, glass is glass in there. I think glass is in there as well somewhere. There's there's a lot. Let's see if I actually wrote.
Yeah, the three primes are sulfur, mercury, salt, and then things get weirder from there.
I think the 5 I'd come up with to mimic Legends of the Wulin would be bone, silver, ash, water, and salt,
Nice.
which just about fit if you squint and don't know much about alchemy.
I
Which
mean, it's not real, so it doesn't really.
suspend that disbelief. Go on.
It's like saying that your game is incorrect about astrology. Like it's not actually that big of a problem.
Yeah, well, people really care about astrology.
Well, they can leave angry comments below. That's engagement.
I guess. Someone came up to me at UK Games Expo the other week and was like, how do you make how do you get a presence in tabletop RPGs?" And I was like, well, the two ways I have seen people do it: one, release a game every month for like 2 years so people know who you are, and two, have a hot take on everything for 2 years. I'm not sure that's going to get you good attention, but people will know who you are if you have something to say about everything.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, this is continuing my habit of giving absolutely terrible advice. Like, I mean, it'll work, but I really wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah, my mute list on Twitter is substantial.
Yeah, I ran like enough blockchains during Gamergate that my block list is in like the hundreds of thousands somewhere. Like, it's really quite extensive.
I can't believe it's almost been 10 years.
Jesus Christ. That is a very long time.
Yeah. Sorry, I can feel my own mortality setting in. So tabletop games, am I right?
Yeah, nothing to do with mortality there.
Absolutely nothing. Um,
I think I was still sifting through my list of like possible projects. Got a couple of projects with Galen Peugeot. I don't actually know how to pronounce his surname. Peugeot. He's an artist. He's really on the up. Like, I'm seeing him popping up all over the place. He's done a load of work. Yeah, he's just really good. He did all the art for Bleak Spirit in a rush after like 3 other artists flaked on me one after the other. And he was real good. And then he's done a bit here and a bit there. He did like the Star System art for Strike Force Omega. We've sort of got a vague collaboration going on for Thread Cutters, which is a sort of like, it's kind of like John Wick meets the tarot, and that you're sort of employed by the major arcana to go and off the face cards and the various lesser suits. They're all in their own little pocket reality.
nice.
It's a real good concept. That's all Galen. I've just come up with some mechanics to stick on his idea. This was after I complained on Twitter. Like, I like coming up with mechanics, but I don't like setting writing. And Galen was like, "Well, I've got this setting, and I don't want to come up with any mechanics for it. How about we work together?" I was like, "Cool, let's do that." And he might be helping me out with Guardian Mecha Generations as well. I say might because he pinged me on Discord about it like 20 minutes before this interview started, so we haven't really talked about it. But that's my mech game that's been in an ashcan form for about 3 years. Um, it's a mech game based on Quest, and then I was currently sort of doing the rounds of Salvage Union, which is a mech game
Mm,
based on Quest. And I saw that come out and I was like, well, that's annoying. But then I read it. It's real good and it's completely different. Like, the only things these games have in common are they both got giant robots and they're both based on Quest.
I think they're both
So
British too. Yeah.
yes, yeah.
I believe I could be mistaken about Salvage Union, but
No, I'm pretty certain. I know one of the authors is British.
yeah.
Not sure about the other one.
Yeah, I remember
But yeah,
interviewing them and I have a distinct UK impression.
yeah, yeah. I ordered my copy at UK Games Expo as well. I was tempted by the beautiful design work on the book.
The cover art is so good, like the classic car manual style.
Yeah, I love the weathering they put on it as well. Like, it looks like a proper like post-apocalyptic job.
Yeah.
Like, It's real nice. The design work on that game is very, very good, and the game design stuff is very good too.
Yeah,
I
and
think, from having read it.
like the universe is fun.
Hmm.
I like robots. I'm a simple
Yeah,
man.
yeah. My feeling is that every game designer has a Dark Souls game and a Giant Robots game. Like for a while, I feel like the Giant Robots market was kind of shut out a few years back because if you want crunchy, you got Lancer, and if you want storytelling, you got Beam Saber. And there didn't feel like there was much room in between, but slowly that's people are moving to other giant robot games. I think Armor Stir is
Yeah,
the current sort of big one, and there are the Salvage Union. There's loads of others, and Armored Core's coming out in a
yeah,
couple of months, so I expect we will see a lot by the end of the year.
yeah, yeah. There's like Apocalypse Frame for Lumen and
Yes,
Steel
yeah, I knew I'd
Hearts.
forgotten one.
Steel Hearts
Yeah,
just
that's
came
that's
out. Yeah.
yep,
Uh,
um,
Maharlika, lest we forget,
yep,
from Makapatag, and yeah,
yeah. Um, Apocalypse Frame is really interesting because that came out just before Strike Force Omega and was designed. I think Binary, whose real name I don't know, was working on it about the same time as I was working on Strike Force Omega, but we weren't really talking. We weren't communicating about it. So it was interesting when it came out to see the convergent evolution between the two. Like we've both kind of like there are places where we've addressed the same sort of things in the system, like we've made combat crunchier and we've put more structure into the campaign system. Yeah, it's just interesting to me to see that we've kind of zeroed in on the same bits of Lumen and changed them different ways. But
yeah,
yeah, like I say, convergent evolution is just interesting to me to see how that works.
yeah, for sure. Um, do you have any final words you'd like to say to our audience beyond, buy
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 my
everything?
stuff. um, if I'd known I was going to have to say final words, I'd have planned some. Um, no, I'm good. I'm good. Buy my things. The games are great. I don't know how to communicate that to people. So many people giving me advice on selling stuff at UK Games Expo. Which they all meant well, and they're all going to be beating their heads against the wall because I'm so bad at it. Um,
Well, I'm gonna
no,
say specifically buy Strike Force Omega. It's got
it's
railguns and
pretty good.
sorcery in
Yeah.
space. Yeah.
Yep. It's got six alien adversaries, or at least one of them is also humans. So six bad guys, sample campaigns, everything you need. You can pick it up, get going. Nice campaign frame. So you've got a designated start point, end point. Tell a story. It's all good.
Also, the art is fantastic. The star system art is great. Um, I love it. Anyway, have a good night. Buy Strike Force Omega. Good night, everybody.
Night night.